They told her not to come. "Don't show up, you'll embarrass us," the message read, cold, cruel, and clear. But Emma Walker had heard that tone her entire life. Branded the disappointment of the prestigious Walker family, she had walked away 7 years ago, away from the expectations, the legacy, the constant belittling. Her father, Richard Walker, a tech mogul and founder of Walker Innovations, had cut her off emotionally the moment she refused to follow the carefully planned executive track. Her brother Andrew, ever the perfect son, reinforced it at every turn. They never asked why she left. They never cared. Back then, they thought she was chasing a pipe dream. In reality, she was building one of the most disruptive energy companies in the country under a different name, Emma Lawson, her mother's maiden name. While they rolled their eyes at her rebellious phase, she was securing patents, building labs, and hiring the brightest minds to change the way the world stored energy. Her success didn't come with fanfare or family pride. It came in silence, fueled by rejection and purpose. The estrangement wasn't just emotional, it was strategic. They couldn't control what they couldn't see. Emma's absence from family gatherings wasn't avoidance. It was survival. And when she returned not as the forgotten daughter, but as the CEO of Lawson Tech, her presence would rewrite the narrative they'd forced on her. The daughter they tried to forget was the only one who could save them now. They didn't know who she was, not really. To the business world, Emma Lawson was a visionary, a pioneer in sustainable energy technology, and the CEO of Lawson Tech, a $4.2 billion company. But to the Walker family, she had vanished. Her real name, Emma Walker, the daughter of Richard Walker, founder of Walker Innovations, one of Austin's oldest tech dynasties. The same daughter who had once been laughed out of boardrooms and told she was throwing her life away for refusing to take the VP title her father tried to hand her like a party favor. What the Walkers never realized was that Emma had never disappeared. She had transformed. After leaving home, Emma dropped her father's name and adopted her late mother's, quietly carving out a new identity in the fiercely competitive world of tech innovation. While her family clung to outdated business models and polished appearances, she buried herself in research, working day and night to develop quantum battery technology that would revolutionize electric energy storage. Her breakthrough wasn't a fluke. It was years of failure, sacrifice, and relentless experimentation. While they called her rebellious, Emma was earning recognition in circles her father could only dream of, gracing the cover of Techline Weekly, and named one of Fast Company's most disruptive founders under 35. The irony was poetic. Walker Innovations, once a titan of industry, was now hemorrhaging market share and desperate to pivot toward sustainable energy. And the very technology they were trying to license, it was Emma's. Her firm Lawson Tech had already drawn interest from every major manufacturer in the electric vehicle sector. But Emma wasn't in a rush to sell. Not until she heard that Summit Capital, led by the legendary financier Charles Summit, wanted in. And not just that. Summit wanted to offer Walker Innovations one last lifeline, a strategic partnership with Lawson Tech. Under one condition, Emma had to be at the helm. The man her father had spent months trying to meet, chasing deals and pitching outdated slide decks to, wasn't interested in him at all. He was there for Emma. Behind her quiet rise was an act of purposeful invisibility. Emma hadn't just built a new company. She had erased herself from the Walker family narrative so completely that when she reemerged, no one in her old world even recognized her. She became a mystery, an unknown name, leading the next great energy breakthrough. And she liked it that way. It gave her power. For years they thought she'd vanished in failure. She let them believe it, not out of spite, but out of focus. Building something real, something world-changing, required more than validation. It required freedom. And now, with her company thriving and Walker Innovations gasping for relevance, the time had come for her to step out of the shadows. Emma's decision to hide her true identity had been both personal and tactical. She wasn't interested in proving her father wrong. She was interested in proving herself right. But with her return, she did both. When Charles Summit addressed her as Ms. Walker in front of the entire ballroom at her father's birthday gala, the truth landed like thunder. The daughter they had dismissed, underestimated, and written off had become the industry leader they had spent months trying to court. In that moment, Emma didn't need to boast. She didn't need to gloat. Her silence was her statement. The identity they rejected had become the future they now depended on. The quiet genius they ignored was the only one who could lead them forward. They didn't see her coming because they never bothered to look. They were dressed in their finest Austin's elite, packed into the grand ballroom of the Hilltop Country Club to toast Richard Walker's 60th birthday. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, laughter flowed like champagne, and the who's who of Texas Tech circled the room like planets around the sun. The man of the hour stood proud, basking in the attention, completely unaware that the very ground beneath him was about to shift. Outside, Emma Lawson, born Emma Walker, stepped out of a sleek black car. She wore a simple black dress, no flashy logos, no entourage. Around her neck, a delicate silver crescent moon, her late mother's pendant glinted in the fading light. As she approached the entrance, the event coordinator froze. I don't think you're on the list," the woman stammered, already reaching for her phone. Emma smiled politely. "You'll find my name under guests of Charles Summit." He called ahead. A few taps later, the woman's face went pale. "Oh, yes, right here. Please, come in." Inside the same marble floors Emma once walked as a reluctant heiress now stretched before her as an empire ready to be claimed. Every face she passed was familiar, but none recognized her. Not until Andrew, her brother, spotted her across the room. His expression twisted. "What are you doing here?" he hissed, storming toward her. "You're not welcome," Dad said. She cut him off calmly. "Charles Summit asked me to be here for an announcement." "Summit, what the hell does he want with you?" Andrew snapped, confusion spreading across his face. Before Emma could respond, the room fell silent. Whispers swept the crowd like a breeze through dry leaves. Then Charles Summit himself entered, flanked by advisors and trailed by anticipation. Everyone knew something big was coming. Summit's firm, Summit Capital, didn't attend birthdays for no reason. Richard Walker beamed and rushed over. "Charles, so glad you could make it. Let's talk." But Charles wasn't looking at him. His eyes scanned the room, then locked onto Emma. "Ah," he said with a smile. "There she is." Gasps erupted around them. He strode past Richard without a second glance and extended his hand toward Emma. "Ms. Walker, it's an honor to finally meet you in person." The ballroom froze. Richard went pale. Glasses were lowered. Conversation stopped. "Wait." Walker, someone whispered. "That's Emma Walker." Andrew looked like he'd been punched. Claire Richards' second wife nearly dropped her cocktail. Emma stood tall, her voice calm. "Yes, Emma Walker, CEO of Lawson Tech." Charles turned to the room. "And the reason we're all here tonight." The revelation rippled through the crowd like thunder. The mysterious CEO of the billion-dollar clean energy firm, the one poised to revolutionize the electric vehicle industry, was the same daughter Richard had dismissed as a failure, the same woman whose name hadn't been spoken at family dinners in years. Emma didn't have to explain a thing. Her presence, her poise, and Charles Summit's deference said it all. In that moment, every judgment, every slight, every door they'd slammed shut, echoed louder than any toast could. The room that had once cast her out now realized they were standing before the one person who held their future in her hands. She had returned not for revenge, but for clarity. The unveiling of her identity was no act of defiance, it was a reckoning, and it was perfectly timed. The room fell so quiet you could hear the ice melting in cocktail glasses. Just moments earlier, Richard Walker had been basking in applause, the celebrated founder of Walker Innovations, surrounded by senators, CEOs, and socialites. But now all eyes had shifted to his daughter, Emma Lawson, standing with quiet authority beside Charles Summit, the man Richard had desperately been courting for months. And that was the twist no one saw coming. The elusive CEO of Lawson Tech, the billion-dollar clean energy company poised to revolutionize electric vehicle batteries, that was Emma. The same Emma Richard had dismissed as not business-minded when she brought him early prototypes 7 years ago. The same daughter he had ignored at dinner tables, spoken about in hushed tones, and referred to as a disappointment for not joining the family company. Emma didn't need a microphone. Her calm voice sliced through the silence. Lawson Tech and Summit Capital are entering a strategic partnership, she announced, looking directly at her stunned father. Together we're acquiring a controlling interest in Walker Innovations. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Richard stumbled back a step, grabbing the back of a chair for support. Andrew, his son, and the so-called heir to the company flushed crimson. "You can't do this," he spat. "This is our company." Emma's eyes didn't flinch. Actually, Charles Summit interjected smoothly, "We can, and we are." Charles turned toward the crowd. Emma's battery technology is a generation ahead of anything else in the market. Every major automaker is knocking at her door. But she insisted her family's company be given the first opportunity. Emma continued, her voice unwavering. It was a courtesy, not an obligation. Claire, Richard's wife, stepped forward in a panic. "She'll ruin everything we've built," she snapped. Emma gave a soft laugh. "Everything you built? You mean the company stuck on gas-powered systems while the world turns electric, the company losing market share by the quarter?" The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm cloud. For years she'd been seen as the problem child, the one who wouldn't fall in line. And yet here she was, holding the very solution her family's legacy needed to survive. When Richard finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "And if I say no, then we'll offer our technology to your competitors," Emma replied without hesitation. "And trust me, they're ready." Andrew looked like he wanted to explode, but Richard raised a trembling hand. "Be quiet, Andrew." He turned toward Emma, truly looking at her for the first time in years. "The tech, it's really yours." Emma nodded and held up her phone, displaying patent schematics and prototype footage from Lawson Tech. "While you pitied me for leaving, I was reshaping an entire industry." Tears welled in Richard's eyes. A pen was placed gently in his hand. The room held its breath. With hands that once signed million-dollar deals without blinking, Richard now shook as he signed the paper that turned everything over to the daughter he once cast aside. The announcement echoed through the hall. "Please welcome the new CEO of Walker Lawson Industries, Emma Walker." The applause came slowly at first, unsure, then stronger, reluctant respect growing with each clap. Emma didn't smile. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was the statement. This wasn't a revenge story. It was a reckoning, a quiet, powerful reclaiming of worth. Emma had built something world-changing, and she hadn't needed permission to do it. The ink dried slowly on the contract, but the legacy shifted instantly. Emma Walker Once the family's black sheep now stood as the majority stakeholder in the very company that had once shunned her. Walker Innovations, a once dominant tech firm slipping toward obsolescence, had just become Walker Lawson Industries, with Emma as its new CEO. It was a seismic shift, not just in ownership, but in narrative. For years, her family had written her off. Her father, Richard Walker, had openly dismissed her ambitions as childish, her ideas as unrealistic. Her brother Andrew, smug and loyal to the old system, had seen her as nothing more than a threat to the status quo. And her stepmother Patricia had been vocal in preserving the image of the family business, one that conveniently didn't include Emma. But Emma hadn't come back to make a scene. She came to lead. The takeover wasn't hostile, it was strategic, necessary, and surprisingly generous. Emma could have let the company collapse, let the same boardroom that once ignored her be devoured by the competitive market. But instead, she gave them an opportunity. They didn't deserve a second chance. Production starts in 6 months, she announced, her voice calm but commanding. Every division will begin transitioning to electric platforms using our proprietary quantum battery technology. This isn't a suggestion. It's a roadmap. The old guard in the room exchanged nervous glances. The future had arrived, and it was being driven by the very woman they had once believed too emotional, too naive, too different to lead. Only now those differences were exactly what the company needed. Emma didn't waste time trying to win their approval. She wasn't interested in the applause or the nods of belated respect. She had her vision and she had her plan. Back at the Lawson Tech Labs, her teams were ready. The prototypes were finalized. The patents were airtight. Walker Innovations wasn't being rescued. It was being rebuilt from the inside out. Claire, always polished and performative, tried to interject. But what about our partners, our investors? They'll follow innovation, Emma interrupted, not legacy. Her father remained quiet for most of it, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of awe. But when he finally spoke, it was with the humility of a man who had just seen his entire worldview rewritten. I didn't realize, he began. No, Emma said softly, you didn't want to. The difference between her and them had always been vision. They looked at the company as inheritance. She saw it as responsibility. Where they chased power and image, she pursued impact and progress. And now that vision had put her in command. It wasn't just about taking control. It was about redefining what control meant. Not domination, but direction. Not punishment, but progress. The new sign above the corporate headquarters would read Walker Lawson Industries, but the foundation had already changed. The decisions now would be led by innovation, empathy, and clarity values Emma had lived by even when no one believed in her. This wasn't just a win, it was a revolution, and it had a woman's signature at the bottom of the page. The terrace was quiet now. The party had faded into a slow hum of jazz and clinking glasses, but Richard Walker stood a few steps behind his daughter, unsure of how to bridge the canyon he had helped create. Emma didn't turn to greet him. She simply watched the Texas hills fade into dusk, arms crossed loosely, her mother's silver moon pendant glinting gently at her collarbone. You tried to show me your designs that night, he said, voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. You were so excited. And I didn't even look. Emma closed her eyes. The memory had never left her how she'd held out those sketches like a lifeline, only to have them dismissed with a scoff. No, she replied. You didn't. He stepped closer, slow and uncertain. I was wrong about everything. When she turned to face him, she didn't see the titan of industry anymore. She saw a man stripped of pretense, a father finally forced to reckon with what he'd overlooked. The man who had once told her to stop playing engineer now stood on the edge of an empire that only existed because she never stopped. Can you ever forgive me? he asked, his voice cracking under the weight of years. Emma looked down at the crescent moon charm, her mother's last gift, and thought about all the miles she had walked alone. The late nights in labs, the rejections, the doubts, the breakthroughs. That depends, she said gently. Are you ready to learn from your daughter? Richard's eyes met hers raw and honest. He nodded. Teach me. That was the moment. Not the contract signing, not the public reveal, not the billion-dollar valuation. This, the quiet surrender of a father willing to admit he was wrong. The beginning of healing, not built on ego, but humility. For so many years, Emma had dreamed of hearing those words. But now that they were here, she didn't feel vindicated. She felt something deeper relief. Not because she needed his validation, but because the little girl inside her, the one who used to sketch battery systems on the back of napkins, had finally been seen. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration. The next morning, she walked into her new office, once Richard's, with sunlight streaming across the desk. The company name on the glass door now read Walker Lawson Industries. The walls had been cleared of old portraits and heavy symbolism. In their place was a new beginning. There, resting quietly on her desk, was a package wrapped in brown paper. Inside, an old weathered engineering textbook, her mother's. A sticky note peeked out from a page near the back. Her mother's handwriting, for Emma, who will change the world her own way. Tears welled in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the beautiful symmetry of the moment. She had come full circle. She had changed the world, not by becoming who they wanted her to be, but by becoming fully herself. And now finally, her father stood with her, not as a gatekeeper, but as a student. The old nameplate was gone. The walls once lined with her father's accolades had been cleared, replaced with whiteboards and innovation models. Emma Walker sat in what used to be Richard Walker's corner office, sunlight pouring across the desk like a promise. In front of her lay an old engineering textbook, her mother's marked with a handwritten note for Emma, who will change the world her own way. She had done exactly that, not with the family's approval, not with their applause, but with vision, grit, and an unshakable belief that she was meant for something more. Emma hadn't just proved them wrong, she proved herself right. And in doing so, she gave her family a second chance, not out of obligation, but from strength. She built quietly. She led bravely. She returned not for revenge, but to rebuild on her own terms. You don't need permission to become who you're meant to be. Sometimes the people closest to you won't see your worth, not until it's undeniable. But that doesn't mean you stop. Keep building. Keep believing. The world may not understand your vision right away, but that doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. If you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or told you weren't enough, this story is your reminder. You are not invisible. You're just getting started. What about you? Have you ever felt dismissed by the people who should have believed in you the most? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. Let's build a community where every voice is heard and every journey matters.